these attacks are a product of a serious design flaw and not an implementation or an error or a bug. So Mr. Adi will tell us more about the MITM attack and how we can probably ward it away. And since that's all that I can add to the morning, let me just hand over to Mr. Adi, please. Please. A big hand and applause for Mr. Adi Sharabani.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Okay, so I was already introduced. Today I am going to discuss the concept of active man-in-the-middle attack. In this attack, in the scenario where we're trying to address in this presentation, in this research, we try to think about what would be the consequences of using a scenario where a man-in-the-middle exists, but having the fact that the interactions between side A and side B would be HTTP. And what could happen through that? We looked around the internet before doing the research, and we saw that the network layer man-in-the-middle scenario is well known, well researched. There are a lot of examples about how to do that, and so on. But man-in-the-middle scenarios, when intercepting interaction of web applications, were not fully researched. And this is the purpose of the research that we have done. The outline of the presentation will be as followed. I'm going to first discuss passive man-in-the-middle attack, the regular man-in-the-middle attacks that we are all aware of. And immediately after that, I'm going to introduce the items that we understood through our research, which is the active man-in-the-middle attack. I will show you some examples and demos of how this could be done, and will present even more sophisticated problems that active man-in-the-middle attacks can raise, specifically allowing an attacker to penetrate an inside organization protected by VPN or so, even to penetrate an inside organization that is not connected to the internet in any way. And at the end of the presentation, we will talk about some remediation activities. In general, the all problems that I'm going to raise today are problems that are by design. So there isn't an immediate solution for that, but we will discuss this in the remediation part. So before I begin, how many of you are planning to use wireless internet throughout their stay here? How many of you? Okay, that's better. How many of you ever used wireless networks? Okay, who doesn't understand my accent? Okay. So we all know the problem of surfing a wireless network. Man-in-the-middle is very easy to achieve in this way. Several good lecturers in Black Hat last year have presented ways and tools to do that. And we, as security experts, we have some rules of thumb about what we are allowed to do in a scenario where we are concerned about a man-in-the-middle and what we aren't allowed to do. So in general, we know that someone might be listening to everything that we are sending. So we would rather avoid sending credit cards, username and passwords, and so on. We know that SSL is supposed to give us some kind of protection around this. But obviously, if we can not do that, we rather avoid doing this, submitting this information. We also know that someone might alter the responses that we receive. So we would not trust the information that we receive from the net. Specifically, it means that if I am a security expert, I would never download any executable or any browser extension or update to any program if I'm in such a scenario. Now, I don't know how many of you don't read their email account, their webmail account through a wireless network and so on, but let's assume that everyone is doing these rules of thumb, behaving according to these rules. Then we can assume that we are all safe. We don't send anything sensitive. We don't trust anything that we see on the net. We actually only look at our favorite sites, such as Google and our news channel or weather channel. And even that maybe not, because if we are going to rely on the weather channel when traveling to India, then we might be susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks. But let's assume that we are following these rules, and what I'm going to show you today is that even if we differentiate the websites that we are surfing into boring sites, we will call them boring, as there isn't anything interesting about them, and we will only surf to those sites, and we will leave the interesting sites alone. Even if we do that, we are still vulnerable. And this is what I'm going to show you today. So let me, just before I'll really start with the presentation, I have to mitigate a common fallacy. The fallacy states that executing JavaScript piece of code on a victim's machine is actually an attack, but it is not the case. Does anyone know why? Okay, so in general, JavaScript has a lot of restrictions in it. So the fact that I'm capable of executing JavaScript doesn't allow me to do anything I want. It will not allow me to access files on the local machine and so on. Specifically, there is a restriction called same origin policy, which states that the script that is running on my browser can only interact or fully interact with the website it came from. So if I'm browsing to www.attacker.com and get a JavaScript piece of code, this piece of code would not be able to fully interact with my bank site. It will only be able to fully interact with www.attacker.com, so there isn't really an attack over here. In reality, if I'm capable of executing a script and making your browser think that this script came from bank.com, then this means an attack because I can fully interact with your bank site, with your credentials. Okay, so let's discuss what I call passive man-in-the-middle attacks, and this is the regular scenario. We all know that. You send a request, the man-in-the-middle sees that request, can change it, forward it to the server, receives a response, can look at this response, change it if he or she desires, and forward it to the victim. This is a passive man-in-the-middle attack, and as we stated before, the interesting servers are not in the game. What happens in the active man-in-the-middle attack, the attacker makes use of the fact that this side is actually a browser. So what will actually happen is that this victim's browser will send an HTTP request. The attacker will see this request, forward it to the boring site, gets a response, and return that response to the victim, but together with an iframe. The source of this iframe will be a sensitive website. When your browser will try to parse this HTML and see the iframe with this source to the bank site, what will it do? Direct your browser to the interesting site. And this is the whole concept of active man-in-the-middle attacks. It's very simple. But as I'm going to show you soon, the consequences of that is terrible. So just another couple of notes. The iframe, as you see it here, could be invisible so that no one would see it, and I could implement an iframe that would redirect your browser to any site I would like, even to numerous of sites. And that would allow me a lot of, to perform a lot of new attacks. So the first thing, and this is very obvious, I can steal any cookie that exists on your browser. How can I do that? You're browsing a boring website, and I'm redirecting your browser to an interesting website. I see that request. So I see a request from your browser to the interesting website together with your cookies. I can take those cookies and authenticate as I was you when I'm going to your site. So let me show you a demo of this. So this is an interesting website. This is the victim's browser. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to an unsafe network. The way I'm illustrating an unsafe network is by raising a proxy and tunneling all of Firefox communication through that proxy. So this proxy is my active man-in-the-middle attacker. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to browse to a sensitive website, a boring website. Let's assume www.google.co.in.